We're at the boat ramp. There's the ramp there. And I'm going to call this a nothing bank. And the reason I call it a nothing bank is because it doesn't really have anything noticeable, not a noticeable point. It doesn't have a rock sticking up or a log. I just don't see anything. Also too, notice the grade of the land coming towards us. It's not exceptionally steep. So I wouldn't expect that to change very much as it comes out into the lake. I would expect that to continue as another shallow slope with nothing on it. That I'm not saying there's no fish here, but what I'm saying was without some experience or without doing some fishing here, if I've never been here before, I avoid the nothing bank. The first lure I'm going to try today is a simple jig. Got that G-Crack Spyron trailer they sent me. Looks like a great jig trailer to me. That's what I'm going to use it for. Thanks guys for that. Thank the G-Crack guys for the freebie. Jigs are good baits for any time of the year, but I use them when fishing without a depth finder, especially because they go to the bottom quickly. So what I do is I use it as my depth finder. I'll drop the jig off the side of the boat and let it fall down to the bottom. And then I'll 1, 2, 3, I'll count the turns. And I know this reel pulls up about, I think it's about 34 inches of line per turn. So I know this water's about 9 feet deep. I don't need a depth finder to determine the depth. I just need a jig that kind of goes down to the bottom, or really anything, Texas rig, plastic worm, any lure that you drag along the bottom there will work just fine. I just use it as a depth finder. And as we talked about on one of the last videos, on a windy day like this, if I don't know where I'm at or know what I'm doing, I'll throw that jig out and let it go down to the bottom. And now it's dragging the bottom. The wind is blowing me, and I can feel that jig bumping and dragging along the bottom there. You can see it in the rod tip. I'll turn the camera around in a second and edit that in. But if I don't know what I'm doing, I've never been in this lake before, let's let the wind blow me around and drag a jig like this across the bottom. Maybe I'll give it a tug like that and let it fall, or maybe I'll pick it up and let it fall. I'm using it to feel my way along the bottom. It actually feels pretty good down there. There's a lot of rocks. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for rocks. I'm looking for sticks or trees. Anything to snag it up. That's where the fish are going to be around. Okay, I'm just letting the wind blow me along here. Dragging my jig along. Probably a good day for spinner baits. Windy days like this are good days for spinner baits. Just kind of because. Try one. I got one on the bottom of the boat right there. Alright, so I was talking about setting the hook. I would love to use an example of catching a fish, but you know, it's February, so I'm just going to talk about it if it was happening. Because if we wait till when it's happening, we might be waiting until spring. Anyway, let's say I get a bite. I've been noticing in my kayak where your hands are very important. You can't get your hands out of position in a kayak because you can't move really to recover, help yourself recover. So I've noticed on the fish that I've been catching from the kayak my hook set has, I tighten the reel, the line to the reel. When I get once I feel the bite, I feel the tension with this, and I sweep low, and I keep my rod low like this, pointed at the water. And you can set it back the other way as well, this way. Where I tend to have problems missing fish is when my hook set tends to come this way. You don't have near as much power or strength when you raise your hands to set the hook as you do when you sweep your hands low to set the hook. This sweeping, punching motion is a much better hook set. And you beginners, that's going to help you out a lot. You don't want to get your hands high. It's opposite for fly fishing. You need to keep your hand high and keep your rod kind of up and parallel against the fish like that. That's how a fly rod works. Not so much with these bait casters or spinning rods. I've been having a lot more success on my hook sets with this lower angle, keeping it in here, making sure my line is tight, giving it a good quick low pop like that. That's been driving hooks just really well for me out of the kayak, and I'm trying to incorporate that into all my fishing now. It's been such a positive experience fishing from a kayak. Like I said, it makes you fish a different way. It's made me a better fisherman, I feel like, fishing from this little kayak, because of the restrictions that it puts on you. So I'm right on the outside edge of this shade line that these trees are making right now, and this is important. This is important. This sweet. Okay, see this point? The sun's going down, and it creates this shade out into the lake. This is what I call a shade line, and I fish shade lines no matter where they are. Bass will use the shade to ambush prey. They'll sit in the dark. It's harder to see them in the dark if you're a bait fish out here in the light. So if you're in this water and there's fish in that darker water, they can't see that fish in the darker water. And the bass instinctively know that, and they will feed down these shade lines. So when these shade lines start appearing across the lakes in the afternoon or in the morning, I pay close attention to them with the shocking boat and with the fishing rod. Active feeders will be on those shade lines. Okay, so we've had some rain here recently. There's my boat ramp. Let's see, let's give you some frame of reference there. There's the boat ramp we put in on, and we'll let the wind blow us all the way down this nothing bank. Like, got no bites as anticipated. I fished around my point here, and there was some public fishermen, you know, some guys fishing, so I stayed out of their way mostly. I'm across the lake now, and you know, the first thing I see is this high water. The water's up pretty well because of rain, and we've got some flooded trees right there. I'm gonna put some casts in there on that. Getting blown around here. It's a little bit windy today. The first 8-pound bass I caught out of this lake was off that blowdown tree right there by the duck box on the corner of this island. I've got it marked on the map if you go back and look. I'm fishing the Area 51 reservoir here in Commerce today. I've caught several fish off this blowdown. The one thing, I might not be able to see it right now. All right, now look at that. Look right there. Okay, we can tell this is an old blowdown because of the way it lays on the ground like that. You see that? So it's going to tell me it's old. Most of it is going to be along this big stick. It's not going to be real limby and bushy because it lays down along the ground like that. It's had time to rot down to the ground. That's important, and I'll show you why in a minute. There's another blowdown around the corner I can show you guys. Okay, that didn't work. Went from our boat ramp to our first trees to this point along this windbreak. We fished the shade line. So you can see there's 4 pieces of structure we've already fished that most people wouldn't even notice. And I haven't even had to paddle much. I just let the wind blow me over here. Now I'm sitting on the backside of this on the backside of this island. And we come to a spot like this, and you know, what do you see here? All right, what are the clues here? Or what are some of the things we can see here to give us clues? Well, the point comes down, and the first tree that I come to is what I'm going to call undercut. All right, you see that right there? The tree comes down and the root system's exposed. And the wind and wave action, when it blows up in there, undercuts that tree. And I know it because I can see that it's exposed root system right there. Now look just to the right. Look at that hole. Okay? What happened there and what happened down there as well is there were trees there, just like that one, that got blown over and fell into the lake. And you can actually see that one. It's laying there. So now, because of the indention in the bank, we know to fish out here, because there's going to be a tall tree that comes down from where that hole was and where that hole was. And I've fished the lake before, so I know they're there. But even without having fished the lake, you can see the evidence and know where the old blowdowns are if you just pay attention. Okay, so we've moved from our boat ramp to our first set of structure, wood. I fished my my first blowdown with no love from it, and I'm moving around the point of this island here. You can see the wind is coming at us this way, and this is another visual that you need to pay attention to, the windbreak. So we got a shade line going that way, but we have a windbreak coming this way. See how the water's windy onto the right and calm onto the left? That's what I call a windbreak. So the wind has been blowing all day long, and I know there's a point here, there's an island here. So I'm instinctively just going to come to the areas where the wind is blowing into the bank on my journey as I'm being blown across this lake. Because I'm not really controlling the direction that I'm going, other than just to paddle a little bit and letting the wind blow me. But these subtle differences like this are important. So I'm going to fish right in here on the back side of this, and I actually know from fishing here there's a long point that goes out, and it's obviously implied. See the steepness of the bank, how much steeper it is than by the boat ramp. So we would expect that steepness to continue, and that's a good example of using the terrain that's above the water to make a guess as to what you're looking at below the water. It's a good angle on this. We've got I'm kind of sitting on top of the one blowdown, and we've got another blowdown here in front of me to fish. Slick water out to that windy point, and we got the windbreak with the shade line being created just off the other side of this point. So I'm gonna fish down. Like I said, I know this blowdown goes out far into the, so I'm gonna find with the jig. I'm gonna search for where the blowdown ends out here, and then go back in there with different types of baits. If I don't get picked up with the jig, I don't just stop fishing the blowdown because I don't get any bites on it. And I just want, this is a good angle for this windbreak. You can see the rough water coming to the calm water. And I catch you shock a lot of fish up along those windbreaks sometimes. They'll stack up in there. It just depends on what they're feeling like on the day. But understanding and knowing these things is what's important. Search bait, looking for structure. Nothing gets caught up quite like a crankbait. And that's exactly why I use them. They're effective lures for covering a lot of water. This one is by 6 cents, and you'll notice too, it's a deep diver. It's got a big bill on it. Now my lake here is only probably 9 feet deep at the most. I don't need a bait that dives to 15, but I use it on purpose. The reason I use the deep diver is I know how it's going to dive to about 12 to 15 feet depending on your setup. If it's not hitting the bottom, I instantly know how deep the water is. How I fish this bait though is different than what most people think. I'm fishing it for a reaction strike. And what is a reaction strike? You know, like if you go to the doctor and he hits your knee and you have a reflex action, that's what a reaction strike is. The fish can't help but bite it. So when you crank these baits down into the rocks, As soon as I find the rocks with my jig, I'll run the crankbait into the rocks if I can't get them on the jig. So what happens is it goes down, and it hits the rock, and it deflects funny. And by funny, I mean it shoots erratically left and right. It hits the rock and it has a darting motion. Well, that darting motion will cause that reflex strike the way the doctor hits your knee and causes your reflex in your knee. The bass isn't necessarily feeding on it. It's not a conscious decision for the bass to feed on it. And that's why I like crankbaits. That's exactly why I use crankbaits. I'm kind of forcing them to bite, if that makes sense. I'm putting something down in front of them, and I'm specifically doing this on rocks, in this reservoir especially. It works in wood as well. You're gonna need to go to a different crankbait. Go to a square bill on your wood structures. Usually the square bills are gonna come through there a little bit better than these deep divers. I use the deep divers in the rocks. And I mean, I'll throw this deep diver up into like 2 feet of water. I'm not afraid. Just slow your speed down and crank it and let it hit the bottom. Learn to recognize when your crankbaits stop wobbling. I could feel that right at the end. I was like, that feels funny, because that leaf hits it and it stops that wobbling, shaking action. And that's important because a lot of times the bass will just come up behind this bait and grab it. And that's all you'll feel is that wobbling action stop. And sometimes those are your bites. Okay, this is the back side of this island. The boat ramp is straight through there. You can see we've got nice calm water back here. I've fished along all these little stick-ups and stuff with this jig. No luck. That's okay though. It's early in February yet. But again, as we come back, we're faced with the same thing that we saw on the other side of the island. We're coming out of the slick water here and into the wind. We're getting another wind break. So I'm gonna fish right here just because there's a wind break here. I know there's a nice drop off over here about 50 yards to the right, and there's some rock in here I've caught fish off before. But even though that I know that, I'm gonna stop and fish here just because of this wind break. And if I didn't know that, I would have learned it then. So again, I'm just kind of using what you can see on the surface of the lake to make you stop and think about and fish and help you find the structure without a depth finder. Another blowdown. Let's look right there. Now, of course, you can see this is a new blowdown because the roots are still attached and the dirt's still attached in the roots and all that there. And you can tell too that since it's a new blowdown, it's got a lot more limbs. It's a lot brushier in the top than the other one. It's not just a stick sticking in the water. You see that gap underneath it right there? Even if there's not that big root ball, that gap in between the surface of the water and the trunk of the tree tells you it's a new blowdown because it hasn't had time to rot down to the ground yet. I wanted to show you guys that while I was over here. That's a pretty common thing you see, even if you don't see that big giant root wad sticking up like that, to let you know that it's brand new blowdown. Just that little space between the trunk of the tree and the water, or the trunk of the tree and the ground, lets you know it's newer because it hasn't rotted down to the ground like the first one that we looked at. So you would expect it to look a little limmier out at the end, just like we're looking at there. When I'm fishing with these crankbaits, I'm not really trying to, I've got a lot of flex in this moderate action rod. So my drag is almost locked. I'm just using the reel to set the hook. If this thing stops shaking, stops feeling choppy, gets heavy, sometimes it feels like you reel it up into a wet towel. It feels spongy like that. Awkward feeling. I'm just gonna burn the reel, and what I mean by burn the reel is this: give it 3 fast turns as fast as I can on anything that feels like a strike. What that does, it puts a lot of tension in the rod, and that tension is what sets the hook. You don't really have to set the hook with a crankbait rod. You just have to make the rod bend a lot. The idea is to crank the tension into the rod and allow that tension to pull those hooks in for you. So a lot of times you'll see me, I'm doing it right now, I'll just point the rod right where I'm like almost directly at the lure. I don't really need the rod for anything right now until a fish hits it. And if I can get a bite on it, I'll burn the reel and sweep into him like that. Try to keep my hands low like we talked about before. I don't really want to set my hands up here. I'm better off with a tight line and a quicker hook set. Even if I did it that much, that's a more powerful hook set than raising your hands above your head. Try to avoid raising your hands like that. That's bad. All right, now I'm in some real good rocks down there. I can feel it. It's real choppy. I don't know if you guys can see that there, but I'm right on this ledge. Another thing you can notice too, I can tell the ledge is going that way because the lure is, as I'm reeling it back, it's slightly tracking that way. If you watch your line where it enters the water, and I'm sure I can't film that right now, it's probably too dark, but if your lure seems to be tracking slightly to the right or slightly to the left, it could be off. Sometimes you have to bend your lure, the eye of your lure back a little bit on your crankbaits to get them to track true. But as long as your bait's tracking true and you see it kind of wandering, it tells you the slope of the direction that your bait is wandering when you're dragging it on the bottom like this. Come on, one time. Found a stick. That's a good sign. It got that spongy feeling that I was talking about, but it just got up into a stick or something out there. But that's exactly understanding, like kind of what you're going to have to fish with your rod, and you're going to have to fish with your setup a little bit to get that kind of feel for it. But that's important feel to have. Even that one stupid stick out there, I got it visually marked with my eye where I just cast. That's important. You can catch fish off of that, especially in a lake like this. It has very little wood structure, just a few little sticks and things. And I would imagine that stick probably isn't connected to anything. That's probably just a stick that's, you know, a small log or a stick that's been floating around with the wind. It's usually not there, but that's okay. You know, I found it, and the fact that I brought my lure even through it is great. That was a real good opportunity to get a fish out here, even though I didn't know it was there, but that was still a great opportunity to get a bite today, even though it didn't materialize. That's okay. I catch a fish out here a lot like that on structure, on floating structure that, you know, wasn't there, like old logs or treetops. Sometimes people try to sink brush piles that are no good, that they don't get them sunk down right, and they'll be floating around kind of in the lake with the wind. Those are definitely things to pay attention to. The fish will relate right to them. It doesn't take long at all. When we put our brush piles out, you can literally shock fish off of them within a couple of hours. The small fish will move right into them. I like these main lake points. They're going to be staging up out here to feed. They're going to be moving back in that way to spawn in the shallow water. But I would expect with the gizzard shad forage base in here, these big girls are going to be out here on these main lake points looking for schools of shad to feed on. You got to learn to enjoy the ride and just be cool.